Hey everyone, welcome back to the RTS Guided Programming Coaching Call. I'm Mike Tushir. New type of call for you today, or newish, I guess. Not a whole bunch of questions, but we do have quite a few videos. So lots of video review. We'll be talking about technique and some other video-ish technical aspects of training. So hang around for that. But as always, to get us started off, let's talk about some stuff to help you guys with proper execution of the workout. First question up says, the only way for me to stay in the game of benching 4 times a week is to bench all my assistance and supplemental work with a more narrow grip, like pinky or thumbs away from the knurling. Is this okay, or do I need to take other things into consideration, like underdevelopment of the chest muscles? That's going to depend on why unable to bench with a more standard grip with your competition grip on a more frequent basis. If you have some sort of an issue like your shoulders are bugging you or something like that, yeah, do what you need to do. Bench with a more narrow grip. Now, benching with a more narrow grip doesn't take your chest muscles out of the fight entirely. It just reduces the amount of activity that you're getting there. So I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about it in that way. I would do as much of the training as you reasonably can with the grip that's recommended. However, if you know that benching with a standard grip twice a week, let's say, is going to cause you shoulder pain, and you're going to be unable to bench the rest of the week, then of course use a more narrow grip. I would like to know some more details on what's going on with your bench. Is it shoulder pain? Is there some other issue that maybe I'm not thinking about? What's going on with that? And we can probably get you a better answer, as well as find a more long-term solution. Maybe you should bench with a narrow grip all the time, including competition grip, maybe. Or maybe there's something that needs to be addressed to allow you to bench with a more competition grip more often. Or maybe there's nothing we can do about it and you've already been down all these roads, and we'll just do what we can and you bench with a more narrow grip when it's required. So I'd love to know some more about what's going on with your shoulders, or I'm assuming shoulders, what's going on with your bench in general. So let me know. All right. Next question up is a track-related question. This one says, in the track, which is a great idea, by the way, is that your own invention or is it widely available software? In tracks training load, does that refer to the previous training session? Yes. First of all, thanks for your comments on track. Track is something that we've developed in-house. It's something that me and my team have been working on for years. It started off, there was a lot of interest and buzz going on around heart rate variability, but at the time you had to buy a very expensive heart rate monitor, and the equipment was quite prohibitive. And so we started developing track to take advantage of more standard equipment, and we've just kind of developed in a different direction, and we've become more of an athlete monitoring system rather than a HRV, heart rate diagnostic system, to the point where now in the current version of track, you don't even have to do a heart rate test. It's there if you want to do it, and it will contribute to the overall output. But the subjective indicators we've refined to the point and have enough confidence in our analysis of your subjective indicators that we feel like we can make a pretty good judgment without the heart rate data. Now, heart rate variability is useful. Heart rate variability, HRV itself, is useful, and it's an interesting piece to the puzzle. I don't think that it's a requirement. I've been doing a lot of testing on it myself for a long time. We had Dr. Mike T. Nelson, who's done a lot of heart rate variability research for like a decade, and he taught a series in RTS Classroom, and that's actually available as a classroom bundle, you can check out all 4 hours of his heart rate variability lessons, where he talks about like the science behind it and how to work it into practical application, in the sense of how do you plan training using HRV and how do you adapt training using HRV and so on. Anyway, I'm getting pretty far off the topic of track. Track itself is kind of a standalone heart athlete monitoring device. And thanks very much for your compliments, by the way. We have put a lot of work and effort into that. But as far as the training load question, the simple answer is yes. It refers to your training on the previous day. So today is Monday. When I filled out my track test this morning, it's asking about training on yesterday, Sunday. For me, that was a rest day, so I marked no training, recovery only. So I am training today, Monday. So now tomorrow morning on Tuesday, it will be a reflection of the training I'm going to do this afternoon. So you're taking this test in the morning or pre-training, and it's asking, how do you feel? You know, we have all these questions about how do you feel, but when it asks about your training, what training have you done that contributed to how you feel now? So that's kind of the thought process behind it. Let's see. Another track question says, if you could expand on the idea of differing indicators of intensity versus volume overreaching. This is not generally a concern, the differentiation between volume and intensity overreaching. For us, overreaching type symptoms and type issues are almost always going to be linked to your volume. You can do a heavy single, you can do frequent heavy singles. The problem comes with doing too much of them, too much overall volume. We draw the volume back, and at some point, that's going to look like, you know, reducing intensity as well. But by reducing your overall workload, you'll start to feel better. So this isn't a distinction that we currently make in the track software. It might be something that we take on in the future, but then again, it might not. So for now, it looks at these indicators, but it uses the volume as the adjustment for how to manipulate your overall stress levels. It would be interesting to look at overall intensity, and that's something that we're looking at currently, but it's not something that's like really fleshed out and clearly defined. That may be moving forward in a future version of track. Next question says, my deadlift is the highest it's ever been in training sets for reps. Yet it just doesn't seem to link up at the heaviest weights. I'd hit, for example, 240 kilos strapped before transitioning to RTS. And my first meet in February, I managed 232 and a half. So I do feel like it's somewhat stagnant and less of a technique issue than with my squat potentially. I'd be interested in any thoughts. So what I hear you saying is that you feel like your deadlift is stagnated, and you feel like your improvement in doing reps in the deadlift has not carried over to improving your singles in the deadlift, which is possible. That does happen sometimes. I would look in two places. The first thing I would do is look at calibrating your RPE chart. It doesn't sound like that's the case here, but leave no stone unturned. Look at calibrating your RPE chart. See if that can tease out some of this discrepancy a little bit. It probably won't take care of all of it, but it could be helpful. So reassess your RPE chart, and if that doesn't solve your problem, then we're probably looking at needing to gain more neuromuscular efficiency, which means that you'll probably need to be reclassified. which is not a problem. Just let me know that that's what's going on, and I'll shift you over to a different training group. You'll get a different training program. You'll be on a different training rhythm, and it will be something that provides you with more neuromuscular efficiency. Just keep in mind that because of how guided programming is set up, if we transition one lift over, then we're going to transition all of them over, which may not be a bad thing, depending on how your squat and your deadlift are progressing. So check that out, and let me know if you want to shift to a different group. It's not a problem at all to take care of that. All right, next question up says, I saw my physio today for my weekly appointment. Now been told to rest from squatting and deadlifting and anything else that makes even a little pain until until it appears to be on the mend. Um, for now, the strain does not seem to be getting any better, and if anything, it's gotten worse. Squatting, for example, hurts in general now, even without weight. Um, benching. I was wondering what to do in the meantime. Would leg presses and glute ham raises, or what I can do, be okay? First of all, good on you for remaining engaged and continuing to pursue this thing even when you're hurt. A lot of guys, when they're hurt, they get a little depressed, a little demotivated, and they kind of fade into the shadows a little bit, rest until they're healed up. Excuse me. They rest until they're healed up, and then they come back, and now they're back into full-blown training, and they kind of reestablish themselves into the training rhythm. That's fine. But what you're talking about doing, working around an injury as to the greatest extent possible, is a really good thing, especially from a mental standpoint. The only drawback is what you're already experiencing. You have to find a way to truly train around it, to train yourself in such a way that you're still, but you're not delaying healing, you're not causing re-injury or anything like that. Now, given what I know about where you're at in your healing process, and given that you are under the care of a physio, I would definitely run this by him. I would definitely encourage you to do something. If you can do leg presses and glute ham raises without causing pain, then by all means do it. If it's going to set your healing back, then don't do it. And nobody's going to be better able to tell you about that other than your physio, which my guess is, now I'm not a physio, but my guess is that he would be someone who would tell you to try it with light weights, work your way into it very slowly. If you feel a twinge or a tickle or something's just not quite right, then shut it down, and that's not going to be good for you. But if you can load it and things are okay, then things are okay. And let him know that, and they would be able to advise you further at that point. All right. Next question. Says, my squat usually experiences large fluctuations in the weight of the top set. For example, last week I was able to do 160 kilos for 6, but today I could only barely do 140 for 5. Are these fluctuations normal? My bench and the deadlift have not been like this so far. Well, a 20 kilo fluctuation plus a rep is, doing math public, for you about 15 kilos is 10%. So 20 kilos is going to be about 12% or so, maybe a little more. Yeah, that's a big fluctuation. The big fluctuation. That's not a normal fluctuation. So in a situation like this, there's something going on. You are not neuromuscularly prepared for your additional squat training on, seems to be Monday, or perhaps even Sunday, your day one squat training. When you're doing your heaviest squatting, um, you're not well prepared for that. So let's start looking at, excuse me, again. The direction I want you to go is to start looking at possible reasons for why this might be. Is there some other fatigue that's still residual at this point? Which I kind of doubt, because one, you would have figured that out already, and two, it would probably affect your bench and your deadlift as well. Um, is the rest period just too long? Um, for example, is your last squat on Wednesday or Thursday, and then you don't squat again until Monday? Maybe it's too much rest as opposed to not enough. Also worth considering this training program a big hike in volume or frequency, particularly for the squat. Then we may need to reclassify you and put you in a different training group. It might be that this is just too much and the transition is just more neuromuscular stress than your squat can handle. And maybe it's not that big of a transition for the bench or the deadlift, which is why you're able to handle those more efficiently. So that's where I would start by looking at this. I would say a fluctuation week to week of about 5% is about the most I would expect. And in general, we want to see your estimated 1 rep max trends going up. Now, that's not going to happen every week, but if in general they're going up, then we're going in the right direction. And a fluctuation of about 5% from week to week is something I would consider normal. 10% is abnormal. What you're talking about is quite a bit more than 10%, which is pretty far outside of normal. Also, look at differences in training times. Maybe at one point you're training at in the afternoon, and then at another point you're training super early in the morning. Maybe one workout you have caffeine or a lot of calories, and the other workout you don't. Look at psychological stressors. Look at things that are going to affect that training outcome in the way that you're describing. If it's one of those, I would try to narrow that down. But if you can't figure that out, then it would be worth a shot to reclassify you. So let me know, and we'll definitely get you in a group that's working for you and producing consistent results. This question says, if you want to train hook grip, how do you go about doing it in training? If the working sets call for 5 reps, would you consider doing the first rep hook and then using straps for the next 4 reps? No, I would not consider doing that. I don't think you should consider doing it either. Contrary to popular belief, hook grip is not invincible. I have seen people, quite a few people, drop deadlifts that use the hook grip. It seems to be, when I talk to a lot of people who are just transitioning into hook and are super excited about it, they seem to feel like and think that it's going to be invincible, that, well, I never have to worry about grip again, never have to worry about a drop deadlift because hook grip is invincible. Well, it's not. And plenty of people have dropped plenty of deadlifts doing hook grip, especially in those early transitions. There is a technique to it. And what do we know about technique? You have to practice it to get good at it. So hook grip's no different. I would pursue hook grip just like you would pursue any other technical change. I would practice it a lot. The big difference with hook grip is that you're beating the heck out of your thumb. So you have to give your thumb time to transition. I have not successfully transitioned to hook grip before, so take what I say with a grain of salt. The way I did it, or the way I attempted to do it for a while before I figured out how to actually make my grip strong, for 1 week, I would use hook grip for my first set of all my training or all my warm-ups. So the first warm-up was with the hook, and the rest of them I went back to a mixed grip. The second week, my first 2 warm-ups were with the hook and then transitioned back. And then the first 3 warm-ups were with the hook. And I would pull maybe a few more reps than what I normally would, especially on those hooked warm-ups, to try to build up my tolerance. Um, and then eventually, you get to the point where you can hook more and more of your training. Um, I would continue to use the hook for rep work in the deadlift as well, and I know that that's not really popular. Not a lot of people do that or recommend it, but I do. And so one of our lifters, our most successful lifter, Mark Robb, he's been with us the longest. He's won multiple world championships as a master lifter, and he deadlifts in the high 600s in the 105 class, world record holder and whatnot. So um, if you don't know who Mark Robb is, check him out. He's a fantastic lifter. He uses a hook grip and has ever since he tore his bicep. Um, Mark hook grips all of his rep work. He hook grips on rows. To my knowledge, he hook grips on rows. Um, so if we're doing a set of 5 in the deadlift, he'll hook grip all 5 reps. Um, he's just kind of gotten over it a long time ago. Now, if you talk to Mark, who obviously has successfully employed hook grip, what he did to transition into it, he just said, forget it. He quit cold turkey, not doing any mixed grip anymore. It's all hook all the time. And he would hook grip his training until his hook gave out, and then that would be it for the day. And he said, you're in for a rough couple weeks, but I mean, thumb bleeding and everything. You're in for a rough couple weeks where your deadlift training is crap because you just can't do the weights, you can't do the volume, but in a while, your thumb gets used to it and you transition into it, and you don't never have to worry about it again. Now that doesn't suit my slow and methodical and deliberate approach. But to be honest, there's a lot of appeal to it as well. And from getting over the adaptation standpoint, there's just doing it. And one of those approaches would be something that I would recommend. Using straps would not be something I would generally recommend, though. All right, next up, we've got a bunch of videos to watch, so let me pull up some of those. All right. First up, we have Greg's squat video. So we're going to watch Greg squat. This was from his recent competition, and do a technical and weak point analysis for him. So watch that one more time, if I can back it up far enough. All right. This is pretty classic, Greg. I don't see any, at least from this frame, I don't see any technical issues that I have a big problem with. You seem to be well within the bounds of our 80% perfect technique. So keep focusing on building your strength. From a weak range of motion perspective, it looks like your weak range of motion is pretty typical. It happens right around the femur parallel to the floor. So it's just above legal depth range of motion. By the way that you're moving, I would say that you predominantly need to strengthen your hips. So the way that your program is written, it's written pretty balanced. And if you just do the program as written, then you'll have no issue. But if you wanted to super focus on your weak range of motion, what I would recommend is removing some of the quad focused and back focused supplemental movements. So your higher rep work that's designed to train more muscles rather than movements. I would maybe remove some of those that are focused more on quads and back, replace them with stuff that focuses more on hips and hamstrings. So stuff like good mornings, Romanian deadlifts, straight leg deadlifts, wide stance squatting, wide stance deadlifting, stuff like that. Those are all examples of things that you can use to help further customize your program to fit your weakness profile. Now, I would not touch your assistance work, stuff like pause squats, pin squats, things of that nature. Don't bother with those, but instead focus more on these supplemental type movements, make them a little bit more hip focused, and I think you'll be fine. All right, next up we've got Greg's deadlift. Let's see, Greg's deadlift. Here we go. Okay. Greg, make sure that you're pushing your hips all the way through at the top. I mean, you're definitely in line, but to me, it looks like you're more extended at the back than locked through at the hips. That's not really a technical flaw. That's just me being nitpicky. So what do I see from this? I see that your start position is just a little bit rounded as you break the bar off the floor. So that tells me that as the weight gets heavier, you made this pull pretty easy, but as the weight gets heavier, you're going to have a harder time locking the weight out. That tells me that you need to spend a little bit more time training your erectors. Your erectors are going to have to extend that spine once you get into a locked out position. So make sure that you're training those. Same sorts of movements, actually, you could do a narrow stance good morning, safety bar work, front squats, also straight leg deadlifts. Probably not Romanian deadlifts, and the wide stuff is not going to help your deadlift as much. But yeah, so that should help. Yeah, training those erectors is going to help. In terms of technical issues, the only thing that I really see that looks like a technical issue to me is just that it's that round back start, which isn't, as we've discussed numerous times, it's not really a problem. It's just you need to be aware of what the risks are of round back deadlifting. And it's just super slight. So for you, I really wouldn't worry about it. If it was more than this, then I might consider rethinking things or something like this, but this is not very bad, so I really wouldn't worry about it. Just keep pulling. That's about all I've got for you, Greg. All right, next up we've got Diana's squat. Let's go ahead and watch that again. Oh, back up a little more. A little more. There we go. Diana, I think you just have long femurs. You've got a fairly wide stance. Your toes are out quite a bit, but still there's a lot of forward lean and a lot of hip travel. Yeah, that's just part of the way you're built. It's not a problem. A lot of people are built like this. In fact, some of our best squatters have this build. So it's nothing that can't be overcome. Chris Hunt has a build that's actually, he's got longer femurs proportionally than you do by a good bit. And he's chasing a world record in the squat. So it's definitely not something that's going to like forever curse you or anything like that. Technically, I don't see a lot going on here that needs to be changed. I mean, the weight looks like it rolls up your back just a little bit as you pitch forward. That's not uncommon for such a heavy lift, though. I do think that for you, your hips are a strong point. Something that you could work on would be your quad strength and your back strength. So stuff like front squats is going to be really useful for you. So if you wanted to drop out something, one of your supplemental movements that's more hamstring focused or glute focused, like say good mornings, and pick up some extra front squats, I think that would be beneficial for you. If you have a safety squat bar, use it. Basically things that are going to highlight back and quad strength and force those back and quad muscles to adapt. That's going to be beneficial for you. Technically, Yeah, I mean, there's just a little bit of a rounding going on, but like I said, I know that this is a limit weight, and I'm sure that you don't squat your 70 or 80% work like this. So I don't think that it's like a technical issue, like, oh, you need to change your technique is fine. It's just that it got sloppy. And once you strengthen things a little bit differently, it'll be easier to maintain that form uh, when the weight gets heavy. So that's what I've got for you. Let me transition to the next video, which is Jake's video. All right, Jake sent us this video of his recent competition. So we're just going to go through this video and I'll let you know what I see. Overall, your squats are looking pretty balanced. Um, you do get a little bit of knee collapse, which I bet is a little bit more obvious on this one. Um, so on this video, watch for the knee collapse and watch for your hips to rise a bit first. Good on you for standing up with that weight, by the way. Um, let me kind of back it up a little bit more. There we go. Yeah, you got a little bit of knee collapse. To me, it looks like you need to strengthen your hips. So a little bit less quad and back work and a little bit more glute work. For you, even to the point of glute isolation work is going to be helpful. So stuff like hip thrust and glute bridges and stuff like that is going to be beneficial for you. Um, yeah, so that stuff will be beneficial for you. Training more hips, more hamstrings, um, wide stance stuff, hip dominant stuff. That's going to be beneficial for your squats. All right, I want to watch this bench one more time. Um, take note of where you touch on your shirt in the bench. I think you could tuck your elbows just a bit more and touch just a few inches lower on your chest, and that'll help you have more power off the bottom. Now, you don't want to stay down there. You want to arc it back in kind of a slant back toward over your shoulders, over your chin. But for you, I think you could bring it down just a touch lower. That's the main technical thing that I see going on with your bench. Um, in terms of strengthening off the chest, like most raw benchers, if you work the bottom, that's going to be what's most beneficial for you. All right, so let's check out your deadlifts here. There you go. Pretty good on all your deadlifts. It's hard to see very much technically from this front angle, but I can tell you, let's just give this one more look just to make sure. Yeah, kind of from the floor to the knee is going to be your hardest range of motion. So you're probably a flat back deadlifter, and with that, um, yeah, so you're probably a flat back deadlifter, so your weak range of motion is going to be off the floor. Um, that's about all I can tell you from the video that we've got right now. Um, good pull, though. Good pull. Looked like you took what was there for that day. All right. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. We have a couple explanation questions. The first one says, is there such a thing as doing too many meets too close to each other? Especially for newer lifters, is there any incentive to give more time to train instead of competing like every 2 months or so? Well, there's a lot to be gained from competing frequently, especially for your beginners, more novice lifters. Just you get better at the skill of competing. So yeah, I would, if you can compete every 2 months, then I would do it for the first year or 2 years. You'll get a lot better at competing. Now, with that said, not every meet is important. Not every meet is a meet that needs to be trained up for and peaked for and everything, because at that point, like that every 2 month rhythm, no, you don't. You never have time to train. You never have time to build anything. Um, so while it would be good to compete that frequently, you would identify maybe a handful of meets, maybe every second or third meet that's going to be your important meet. And that's the one that you train for and peak for. The other meet, you just show up, you maybe take openers and second attempts, or maybe you take all three attempts, you just dial down the numbers 5% or something like that. You just look at it like a training day rather than a full blown competition. You don't taper for it. You're back in the gym the next day. So it's more of a practice rather than a full on competition. It takes some discipline to do that, but that's how I would recommend doing it. Now, if you don't have the discipline to do those as training meets, then yeah, I mean you need to pick 3 maybe 4 meets a year, just like the rest of us. Um, yeah. That said, I do think competing that frequently would be a benefit. So now I want to pick up a couple miscellaneous questions that we had from last week that we just didn't have time for. So we'll pick those up now. The first one says, it would be good to know who else is in my group, how many people, perhaps their names and so on, or have I missed something, just for the group or team feel. So not really a question, but I thought it was cool anyway, and so I wanted to mention it. This is not something that we've done in the past. I tend to be a pretty private person, so I just make that assumption, which I feel is a safe assumption of you guys, that if you don't want to share, then you don't have to. Um, with that said, there is the Team RTS Facebook group, which is a closed group that's for like guided programming members, performance coaching members, people that have attended seminars, RTS classroom. So people that are more, I would say, more into the RTS system. It's not people who are just casually interested in RTS. These are people who are putting it into practice, people that are part of the team. So there is that. But if you're looking for something more than that, I would be open to ideas. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up. I wanted to basically ask you guys what you thought. Do you think that, do you want to do something like this? And if you do you have any ideas? What sorts of interactions would you enjoy? What's some things that you would prefer not to be distracted with? Or are you pretty much happy with the way things are going right now, and you don't want to rock the boat? Let me know what your thoughts are on it, and if there's enough interest, or if you guys have, especially if you have a clear idea of what it is that you would like, we can try something for sure. Next question says, do you have any thoughts on the validity of Prilepin's table? That's a cool question, and I'm glad you asked that, because it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. First of all, if you had asked me this even just 6 months ago, I probably would have said no, and I probably have said no, that I didn't think there was much validity to it because it's totally devoid of any context. And what I've come to realize over time is that the fact that there's no context to it is maybe what makes it a little bit more profound. So what do I mean by that? So my problem with Prilepin's chart in the past has been that, like, we have this chart and it tells you, in this volume range, you're or this intensity range, your volume needs to be X or within such and such limits. That's cool. But, what if you're a novice and your work capacity is low? Or what if you're an advanced lifter and your work capacity is super high, or anywhere in between? Like, there's a whole bunch of context of the lifter questions that I would have. Now, over time, what I've come to realize is that I think I would rather, or I know that as a coach, I would rather control the total volume by controlling the frequency, at least to some extent. So if I have an advanced lifter with a high work capacity, I'm not necessarily just going to make their workouts longer and higher in volume, but greater in number, and they get their higher volume requirements, but it's distributed out over a higher frequency. And similarly with a beginner, they're going to have a lower frequency and thus less total volume. So I think that that's the neat part of the lack of context in Prilepin's chart. Now, all that means is that it could be a useful guide in terms of planning a single workout. It's not useful in planning a microcycle or above. So it's only useful in terms of planning a single training session. And even at that, I don't know that it holds a lot of sway for powerlifting, because also keep in mind that Prilepin's chart was developed for weightlifting. So we've taken Prilepin's chart, and if we modify it for powerlifting, it would look different. The characteristics required of the power lifts are different. Your tolerance for volume in different intensity zones is different. And how different is it? I don't know. I haven't done the research, but I do know that it's different. That those workouts aren't equal, And another issue with Prilepin's chart is this sort of problem that you have if you cross intensity zones in a single session. For instance, a lot of you in guided programming have training programs where you'll do a single at an 8 RPE, which is relatively high intensity. We're talking 90% and above. And then you'll follow that up with a lot of volume in the 70% range. So now you have these two different intensity zones in the same workout. How do you justify that within the context of Prilepin's chart? I have seen some interesting mathematical gymnastics to get around this problem, and I like that stuff. But also there's some problems with the validity of that. The body's not a math problem, and there's a lot of complexity here that needs to be accounted for. So I think all this stuff can give you an idea. It can give you a direction, it can give you, the nudge in the way that we want to go, but it's not going to be the solution for you. I do think it's more useful than I thought, 6 months or a year ago. But that's good. That means that I'm continuing to develop as a coach and as a lifter as well. But I still don't think that it's something that I would use directly in my training. It's an educational piece. All right, let's see. Last question is, why do most programs and coaches shy away from high deadlift volume and frequency? What is the reason for your opposing view? Most programs and coaches. You're probably right. Most programs and coaches do shy away from deadlift, high volume, and frequency, at least compared to what we do. However, we're not the only ones that do this. There are several other well-respected coaches who've done very well with higher volumes and frequencies, even in the deadlift. Even to the point where they're matching deadlift and squat volume frequency. What's the reason for my opposing view? Well, I don't know. I mean, that kind of assumes that the lower deadlift volume and frequency is the status quo, and then I'm a departure from that status quo. I mean, I don't rationalize it that way. Like, that's not how I arrived at this. I arrived at this line of thinking like I'm training my squat X, I'm training my bench X, I'm training my deadlift X. So squat and deadlift, um, as it compares, these are my lower body exercises compared to my bench, which is my upper body exercise, and they're um, roughly equal. Lower body volume is roughly equal to upper body volume, and it's split evenly between squats and deadlifts. Um, at least that's the way it was way back in the beginning. Different volume patterns and different templates and things arise over the years. And so there's a twist. Some of you at different programming levels will notice that this is not the case. Some of you will have equal squatting and deadlifting volume, but others of you will not, because there's differences in context that need to be accounted for. A lot of that, they're due. Uh, there are some lifters who seem to have recovery issues from the deadlift for whatever reason. I'm not sure exactly why, but when we see something like that, I mean, I'm not telling your body that it's stupid and it's wrong and it needs to do what I say. I'm working with what your body's given me. So if your body is saying, look, I'm not deadlifting twice a week, then we'll work with that. Now, your GPP and your work capacity will fluctuate over time, and over time you'll get better at the higher frequency stuff. So we may come back to it. But yeah, so it's kind of a difficult question. Why do I have an opposing view? I think their view is opposing, and I think they should have to justify it. And so far, the justifications that I've heard for it don't make any sense to me. Why should the deadlift be, just that much more taxing for your body than anything else? Lots of people have, just as much forward lean in the squat as they do in the deadlift. The squat's range of motion is longer. The squat has an eccentric component, a much more pronounced eccentric component. So in that sense, the squat should be more taxing than the deadlift. But then you'll have people say, oh, well, the deadlift taxes your upper back musculature a lot more, it taxes your grip musculature a lot more. Yeah, but I mean, you never hear anybody say you can only do rows twice a month. Like, that's crazy, So it's not that, and it's not the grip. Like, there's not that many motor units involved. And if we control the volume of each session, we control the intensity of each session, I don't see a reason why we can't control the overall stress of the amount of deadlifting you do. So I think a lot of it stems from people prioritizing their squat, whether they intend to or not. I think that's just in general what people are doing. So anyway, kind of, I don't know, not really a clear answer, I'm sure, but that's a little bit of the background of some of my thinking as far as why the squat and the deadlift are programmed the way that they are in most RTS programs. Let's see. That's about it. That's about all that we've got for this week. So as always, just want to thank everybody for watching. Good luck in your training this week. As always, take what's there, build some momentum. We'll see you guys next time.